Hello and welcome to the webinar of Transforming Testing Teams with Tosca. I'm Al Rego from SPR Consulting. I lead our modern testing practice. And for this webinar, I just wanted to let everybody know that your microphones will be muted, but if you have questions, feel free to type them in the question window and we will attempt to get to them later on in the program. So SPR is a digital consulting company of over 300 people. One of the things I like about working at SPR is that we are the perfect size to both service large clients and still pay attention to smaller clients, whether it's a startup that needs innovative solutions or an older company that's been around for a long time and needs to update their technology. SPR is always going to deliver. One of the things we're proudest of is that we have 87% repeat business with our customers. So we are building brilliantly every day, and we're in Chicago and Milwaukee, and I'm sure that if you know us, you know that this is true. And if you don't know us, I hope to get to know you better, and hopefully we can help you solve some of your problems. I lead the modern testing practice, which is inside of our testing services, part of testing services. SPR's testing services include all of the things that you would normally imagine: test management, test planning and strategy, test execution, both manual and automated. Today we're going to talk about our automated testing solutions, but we still do a significant amount of manual testing. We can do staff augmentation. We can also outsource your testing projects. As a Tricentis Silver partner, the only one in Chicago area, we're prepared to help you with your Tricentis Tosca and Qtest, Flood, RPA projects. We've built some service offerings specifically around Tricentis. Namely, if you want to start your Tosca free trial, we have a Sherpa service that can help you get that installed, walk you through it, show you how everything works, and help you get the most out of that free trial. If you're ready to purchase, then we can help you in a lot of other ways. We are a reseller of all the SPR tool sets, all the Tricentis tool sets, pardon me. And we have put together accelerator packages, testing as a service, and we can come in and do a transformation roadmap for you to help you build a strategy to help you get from where you are to where you want to be. So today's focus is going to be on continuous testing and scriptless automation. We're going to give a brief presentation to show you what the world is doing in this area, and also do a live Tosca demo. Then we'll talk about next steps and how you can get started on your own transformation. So one of the more interesting things that I've learned recently is that when customers have been surveyed about how much automation they have, they typically think that the number is higher than it actually is. Would it surprise you to learn that only 18% of most applications are actually automated, tested in an automated fashion? And that when you expand that to the enterprise, only 8% of the entire enterprise has some degree of test automation. Which begs the question, really, why is this number so low? Automated testing tools have been around for over 20 years. And in that time, we've developed the skills and we definitely have the need. So why is this number so extremely low? And in a world of DevOps and Agile and continuous integration, how does this number play out, and what kind of problems do we need to solve in order to get this number higher? So let's explore this from a couple of different angles. From the CIO's perspective, CIOs are under a lot of pressure to get their products to market as fast as possible. In most cases, not being able to get an application to market, it could be the difference between winning and losing customers. So most CIOs have already figured out that they're going to have to implement DevOps because they need to be able to deploy faster, not only build faster, but deploy and manage and maintain. They also need to reduce their costs. They also need to make sure that the quality of those applications does not decrease and instead needs to be better, because that's another critical factor. Most users don't have much tolerance at all for poor applications. If you go to one site and you're looking to buy something and it slows you down or the process is cumbersome, you're just going to go to the next site and say, I'm just going to buy it from them. So CIOs are under a lot of pressure to get to a 10 times efficiency from where they currently are in order to be best of breed to compete in the marketplace. What does that do from a tester's perspective? Well, as a business tester, the number of test cases has been mostly how we've measured productivity in the testing world. But instead of just focusing on a number of testing, more and more testing is being asked to focus on risk coverage. So we need to use more of a risk-based approach. And then one of the other big issues that we have is test data management and being able to provision data, pull data from production, mask it if there's personal information, and a lot of involvement in the day-to-day management of data in order to be able to do testing. We also are under more and more pressure every day to test more faster with fewer resources. So from a tester's perspective, even more pressure, even more demands to do things faster. So how do we do this from a manual perspective? It just gets harder and harder. How do we do it from a automation perspective? Again, a lot of pressure on the automation side. So let's take a look at where we stand. So where's all this pressure come from to move towards DevOps? In the old waterfall paradigm, we would do all the analysis up front, business analysis, and try and figure out what the business needs. Then we'd come up with a plan, design, build, test, deploy. Where testing was almost always done at the very tail end, always a bottleneck, always under pressure to squeeze the amount of time that it's being done. Well, this sort of step-by-step waterfall, if you will, also has problems, because as market changes happen, you'd have to start another whole cycle. And these cycles in most companies would take 3, 6, 9, 12 months. So most enterprises have already decided that they need to adopt DevOps. And they need to do this because they need a faster way to get from the business identifying a need to being able to build it, test it, release it, and then monitor and plan for the next release. This way we can get more business need into our applications faster. So what does the world look like right now as we're trying to prepare for this world of continuous automation or continuous integration and development? Well, right now, the way the world looks, according to the World Quality Report, is that 80% of our testing is done manually, with only 20% of it being automated. And of that 20%, most of it's being automated at the UI level with some amount of API automation. The problem with this is that we all know that manual testing is expensive and it's slower than automation. We also know that automated testing requires really development level skills and also requires a significant amount of maintenance. So you have less expensive resources, but many of them in order to do manual testing, more expensive resources in order to be able to do automated testing, and really a very specialized skill set that can be difficult to acquire and hold on to. So how do we change this picture? Well, one of the things that we can do is we can take a look at how we currently automate. And we can say that there are some ways that we can get enabling technologies to help move us in the right direction. And if we were to start with the end in mind, being what is a perfect continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous testing, or methodology look like? Well, we would really like to have 85% of all of our functionality automated, and then use exploratory testing for some of the more complex and more experiential aspects of the application. Things that you wouldn't necessarily know unless you had been involved with that business unit for years. So subject matter expertise comes into play. So the mix that we're looking for looks a little bit more like this, where we've got 85% of our automation, and that split in the 85% is heavily weighted towards API testing. Now, the difficulty in doing that now is that API testing requires development skills, and you have to write code in order to do it. A little bit more on that later. We already have an investment in UI, so then we could expand that. But I think we also are aware that we need a different way of doing this so that we're not solely married to all of the resources being developers in order to be able to test our applications. So if we look at that in a little bit closer look, we also want to include performance testing and find ways to do load and performance tests with each iteration in our continuous loop. So we need to look at how we do these things and examine and find better ways to do it. Not only that, but as we talked about earlier, a lot of the testing that we've done so far has usually been based purely on functionality. One of the things we also need to do is examine, based on risk, what we need to test in order to put a release out to our customers so that they have a high quality experience, so that we are leading in our market space, not trailing our competitors, and that we don't lose business because of a poor application. So what we really need to do is do fewer tests that are more risk focused and automate our API and service virtualization through service virtualization, be able to test API early, shifting left, load testing frequently, and then automating our UI as the UI gets developed, and then augmenting with exploratory testing to find those small, very subject matter driven examples of here's an odd thing that customers do that we haven't managed to get into our automated tests. Once we do find those fun things in exploratory testing, then we can make them into automated tests. Also, the exploratory testing handles some of the more complex integration routes and passages and paths through the application that most common users wouldn't do, but some of our power users might. So how do we get to this place? Well, for automated continuous testing, what you really need to do is consider going scriptless and to take your manual testing resources, which you have a lot of, because again, most of us are doing 80% of our testing manually. Let's convert those manual testers into automated specialists. And that's what we're going to cover in this webinar. We're going to start down that path and show you how you can do that. So first of all, let's talk about scriptless automation. So what are we talking about when we're talking about scriptless automation? We're talking about a model-based approach to automating our applications. And a model-based approach is different than a record and playback paradigm. And it's different in the following ways. So when we go to test an application, we have, you can call it your system under test, operating within an operating system. You'll have UI and non-UI components. Sometimes we call those front end and back end. So the whole system needs to be tested. What do we do in a model-based approach that's so different? Well, the first thing that we do is break down the technical information for all of the objects or components and store that technical information in modules. Then the next thing we do is take those modules and put those into a test case. We share the technical information, and that becomes reusable. And then the test cases become instances of those models. So all of your business information is readable and easy to see inside the test case. When you execute a test case, it goes out and uses the model, the technical information, to drive your system under test, and then make things happen in the application so that you can test all the functionality, all the data, boundary conditions, etc. How does this work and how is it different? Well, in most other tool sets, you really have to write code. In a script-based approach, you're writing code in order to go out and navigate from one point of the application to the other. You're going to write code to handle errors. You're going to write code pretty much for everything. If you're going to build a data-driven framework or a keyword-driven framework, again, you're going to write code. It's going to be more reusable. It's going to, give you some better return on investment, but you still have to write code. So you need code savvy resources in order to use these script-based tools. How is Tosca different? In Tosca, you have a model-based approach with business readable test cases. So in this instance, you can see that when I go to a browser to do certain tasks, there are going to be objects that I'm going to click on, and there's going to be data that gets processed when I hit a next button and go to the next page. Well, this is exactly what a script looks like. It's not writing code. You don't have to decipher what's going on. You don't have to figure out functions and classes and doing all that. You don't have to figure out how you're going to encapsulate those things into functions and classes in order to reuse them. All the reuse and all of the business readable logic is built into the interface. So how does it work under the covers? Well, we have an application called XScan that you turn on and then go out and scan for all of the data on a page, and it'll capture all of the objects, and it'll give you even if you have drop-down list boxes, it can even show you the contents of the list box. So for fuel type, for example, you'll see petrol, diesel, gas, other. It goes out and scans that. We're going to do a demo in a little bit, and then we'll show you exactly how this works. But that scanning application, once it pulls up all this information to uniquely identify those objects on a page, you can then just take that and drag and drop that model onto a test case. And that test case will just populate all the same objects. And then you can fill in the actual data and the action that you want to take on those objects. So this is exactly what your script is going to look like. It's pretty much like a spreadsheet metaphor. And then for each subsequent page, again, you recognize the objects and build a model. Then you drag and drop the model to a test case folder, and you can create a test case. You can also, put in different conditions and verifications and wait states and all of those things. But the process is very simple. It's so simple, it's almost like using building blocks and playing Lego. And then with API testing, again, what we used to have to do is take an HTML document where we're calling web services, and we'd have to understand the web service call and be able to build parameters and write code so that we can test our web service and throw different instances of data through it in order to test it, or we would have to wait until the UI was built. And once the UI was built, then we could put the data in there and do that. And we could even automate the UI. But again, the real focus here is you want to try and shift left and do more testing earlier. So waiting for a UI to be built to test a web service is needlessly waiting. The current solution before we started to use Tosca was to write code to test the web service call. But now with Tosca, you have a test suite that can be the UI already for you. It can use Xscan. You can scan the web services. It'll pull up all the parameters. And then again, you're like using that spreadsheet metaphor in order to be able to fill in values and actions on those API tests. And now you can test your web service call as soon as the web service is available. There's also a product that comes with Tosca, built into Tosca, for service virtualization. So you can actually virtualize a service. So if the web service itself is down or a server's down for maintenance, you can continue your testing by kicking off the service virtualization, and it'll pretend it's the web service and be able to answer the calls. And you can set it up so that it'll monitor the web service, so that if the web service goes down, it'll just automatically take over, and it'll tell you in your test results that it was the virtualized service and not the actual web service that you're getting your data from. So it's a very powerful way to help us, again, shift left, do more API testing in our chart, and move us towards that 85% goal of automating our testing. So now I'll do a quick demo and show you exactly how it works. Inside Tosca, you'll see the interface has a bunch of tabs, and in each tab there's sort of a folder structure, a hierarchical folder structure, where we have requirements, test case design, test cases, modules, an execution list, and reporting. So in this demo, what we're going to do is go to an application that Tricentis has built specifically to do demos, and it's called the Tricentis Vehicle Insurance Application. So from this application, we're going to open up Tricentis Tosca and Tosca Commander and take a look at the different modules that we have. So one of the first things we can look at is that we have a requirements module. And this is important because when you go to plan a test, set up and do your testing project, you don't want to just blindly go in and start flailing around. We want to plan things out. One of the powerful things about the requirements tab in Tosca is that we can use different ways to figure out business risk. And in this way, we use a couple of parameters called frequency class and damage class. So how frequently are we using this functionality, and what is the problem? How bad is the problem or damage if something goes wrong? And we can take a look at how that's organized. So we've got it organized by automobile, by camper, and by truck so far. That's the functionality that we've already agreed to and built out. And you can see pretty heavily the automobile is the largest part of our application and also has the highest weight of all the functionality that we need to test, versus camper and truck. They aren't as heavily used. We also have a couple of other features besides the create quote, is modify quote and cancel quote. So with those requirements in mind, we can come out and start building modules, and you can see that we've already built out a bunch of things in here for vehicle insurance, and we have some reusable modules like main menu, which you'll see in action in a little while here. For this demo, what I wanted to do is build a test case from scratch just to show you what's involved. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go down to our blank demo folder, and you can see there's nothing in here. And I'm going to right click on that, and I'm going to call up our scan application, and I'm going to do a desktop scan. So that'll identify everything that's open on my desktop. And once that gets started, there's two modes that the scanning application, Xscan, comes up in. There's a basic mode and an advanced mode, and really it's just about ease of use and trying to allow you to do things quicker or to dive into more detail. So first thing we're going to do is identify the application that we're going to test, which is our website. So I'm going to click on the scan button, and you can see Xscan comes up in basic mode. And I'm going to move that over here so that I can see what's going on. I want to move to, for this demo, since we don't have the motorcycle tab, if you noticed in our requirements, we had automobile, truck, and camper. We didn't have motorcycle. So let's go and start on motorcycle for our demo. So what I can do, actually, let me say I'm finished with this screen. Click on motorcycle. And then I'll bring Xscan back up. And what I can do now is I can start scanning this screen. And one of the easier ways I can use this is I can hover my mouse over any one of the objects, and you can see that it'll recognize each of them. To add them into a model, all I have to do is click. So I'm going to click on each of the entry fields here for entering motorcycle data. And then the next button, which will take us to the Enter Insurance Data tab once we filled out all the data. Now you can see over here in our Xscan window, you can see each of the objects that have been scanned in and added into what will become our motorcycle module. And down here at the bottom, you can see it says the selected item is unique as we clicked on each one of these. That's telling us that it's easy to identify in this application. It was very easy for us to identify each object uniquely. If that isn't identified uniquely, then we can go to our Advanced tab. And there's a lot of different things that we can do in order to get more detail about the application and see deeper and deeper into the hierarchy of all the controls that are on that web page. So for our purposes of our demo, we're not going to get into that right now. We're just going to capture all of these into a module. And how do I do that? I simply click Finish Screen and then close Xscan. And you'll see back under my demo folder, I have a new object which says Tricentis Vehicle Insurance, and it has all of the objects that we just clicked on. So I can even rename this if I want to, and I can call this motorcycle. So now that I've developed a model of the motorcycle page, at least the motorcycle, let's be more specific, vehicle data. Now that I've done that, I can take this and create a test case. And it's as easy as me dragging this up here to the test case tab and then down into a blank folder that I created called demo, specifically for this demo. Now I have a new motorcycle test case, and I can rename that anything I want to call it. So let's say create motorcycle quote. And now you can see I have all of my motorcycle vehicle data. So in order to do a test case, what do I need to do now? I just need to add the value that I want to put in each field and what action I want to take on that field. So here in Tosca, once it's scanned that application, if I have something like a drop-down list box, it will identify all the contents in that drop-down list box. And now I can pick whatever value I want to start building out test cases. And by default, when I take an action on this and say, put this data in, it says I'm going to use that as an input action on that field. So I'll do that for all of these. And just fill out some quick data here. We'll say it was manufactured in 1104 2003. This is one of my old motorcycles. Let's just say 1 seat, list price was $10,000. Annual mileage is about 3,000. And then when we want to tell the application to click on a button, we have 2 options. One is I can click this drop down and say, oh, what are my options? I could click on this button. That's the only action it'll take. If I do that, then what will happen is wherever the mouse is on the screen, the mouse will move over and click the next button. If I want to do it faster and just click the next button as fast as possible, I can use an X, and an X will tell Tosca that I just want to click on that next button right away. So for the purpose of the demo, I'm going to use click. Now, in our application, if I switch back to it, you can see that we've entered no data in here, but I am on the motorcycle page. So let's run a quick test just to see how fast and easy it is for us to run a test case. So all I'm going to do now is inside Tosca, I can right click on my test case and say run in the scratchbook. And this is the fastest way for me to run a test. So now my hands are off the screen, Tosca's coming up, and all of a sudden it's going to enter data, and you saw the mouse move down to the next button. And now we're on the enter insured data, insurance data, which is the next tab in creating a quote. So what you can see there is how quick and easy it is to create test cases in Tosca. And also let's go in and take a look. What do we get when we have our scratchbook open? It said run in scratchbook. So what does that mean? Well, let's go in and expand that. Now you can see that I entered in data for each one of these, and it said it started it at 11 o'clock. We'll expand that just a little bit. 11:06, and you can see how much time each one of those steps took. So this is the basic data that you get when you run a test. And this is the common way that we debug a test as well, is to run it in the scratchbook and see how things go. So once we've executed that test case, we can go and take a look at results. But one of the things that we can do with this test case is we can also create more instances of data, because nobody runs the same test case over and over again. The value of doing something like this and automating it is to try different data combinations. So what we have for that is the test case design tab. So if I take my test case and I drag it into the test case design tab, and I drop it in my demo folder there, I now have, I can create multiple instances for every version of data that I have here. And you can see what I need to do is generate new instances of those test cases. And Tosca gives you automatic ways to do that. There's 5 different methods. One is I could do all combinations of data. And as we all know, when you try to do all combinations of data, that can be a very large number. Still, you have that at your beck and call here by doing this. I'm going to use linear expansion. And what it's going to do is automatically go through each one of those pieces of data, and it's going to show me all of the possibilities. So then I can do that and create a data table with all of those instances as columns. And then what I can do is fill out how I want to play those instances out with other specific data. And you can see this gets to be quite large. So the linear expansion algorithm that I used, based on your requirements, will go out and figure out what the minimum number of test cases you can run to test the maximum amount of functionality. But still, what we do as humans, we could take that, but what we tend to do is we know the business pretty well, so we're going to be more specific about what type of instances we need to run and what kind of things are important to us. So we'll build out instances, say for our insurance automobile quote, that has some very business specific data parameters around it, like engine performance between 1,000 and 2,000, that the manufactured dates are within the past 5 years, et cetera, and build out all those permutations that way. Once we have those test case designs figured out and all those instances figured out, we can come back to our test case tab. And what you can see here is that we've used those instances to build out, let's look at the data-driven types, to build out quote instances, and then we have all of those different vehicle instances accounted for in our test cases, and then we can run a number of tests all at once. So under here, I'm going to use our Scratchbook again and run this test. Now for this, I'm going to close my browser, because one of the things I want to show you is that, one of the things that Tosca can do is run everything from scratch, which when you do an automated CI/CD process, you're going to want to have this be able to kick off automatically and then do everything it needs to do in order to set up the environment and then run the tests and then close everything down. So what we're going to do here is just run a quick demo where we open up the browser, maximize it, verify that it's maximized, and then go through and run our test cases. So it's going to go through and build an automobile test case. It's going to hit every tab. And then it's going to send an email with your quote. And as you can see, it says sending email failed because we didn't set up an email. It says no email will actually be sent. It's just a demo. So with that, let's go back into Tricentis Tosca and see what we have. So here we have the test results in our Scratchbook again. And I can expand all of those and we can take a look at things a little bit more closely. So as you can see, we have some information here about all the things that we did. We opened our sample application, we maximized the browser, and then we did a verification that says, was the browser window maximized? And it says yes. Successfully on Windows with captioned Tricentis Vehicle Insurance. So the maximization has been done. Then in our main menu, we clicked on automobile, and then we went to vehicle data and filled in all the vehicle data. And then we filled in the insured data, the product data, and then we have different pricing options. And you can see that our pricing options have verifications built into them. And this is what that looks like. We were expecting a value of 151, and our actual value was 151. So our tests succeeded, and then we went through and we sent a quote. So as we go and progress through running all these different tests, then one of the things we're going to want to do is take a look at how are we doing overall versus our requirements and how many tests pass or fail. So in a typical execution, you're going to have passes and fails. And you can come here to your execution list, build an execution list out of all of your test cases. And then you can, once you've executed them, you can come in and inspect them. So you can see we've done 45 successful tests, 7 failed for automated tests, and we had 1 manual test fail. If we want to go in and explore where those failures happen, we can expand the list here and we can go in and see, okay, so let's see. We had 2 failures in our automobile. What were the failures? Verification has failed for gold pricing for the expected value. So we expected the value to be 947, but for some reason it came up to 977. So now you can go and investigate that and figure out if that's a defect and pass that along to the developers. And then the other thing that happened down here was, again, we're looking at our pricing table and another verification failed. So with the certain options that we selected here, we were expecting a value of 1024, we got an actual value of 1027, and so on and so on. So you can see a very quick interface, very visual, very powerful for being able to go in and inspect where the problems are. Also have the ability to capture screenshots on failures, so that makes it easier for you to explain to your development team what went wrong. So from a demo perspective, that is how you create a module, how you create test cases, how you can build a test case design worksheet and build all kinds of different scenarios or cycles or test sets. And then you can put those in an execution list, automatically execute them, and then see the results and be able to inspect the results and go to your developers and say, here are the defects that I found in the latest run. So as you can see, very quick, very easy, and I did not write any code. So that's why we say we can train people who have manual testing skills to use this tool to impart their knowledge of the application into business readable test cases that are easy to execute and easy to maintain. The power of doing things in modules like this is that if there are changes to the web page and anything changes as far as like, even if it's a label that changed, and if your test case fails and it's like, oh, I don't recognize that object, all you have to do is click on your module, open up your application and hit rescan, and it'll go back out and rescan the page, and then it'll fix those objects, and any of your test cases that were referencing those objects will automatically be updated with the new model. So very powerful from a maintenance standpoint, very quick and easy from a building test case standpoint. And again, none of it is coding, all of it is business readable, and it's quite plausible and very successful to take manual testers, teach them how to use this application, and be able to turn them into automated specialists. So the next step of what we want to talk about in our webinar is what are the next steps for you? If you are interested in doing this, what do we do next? Well, first of all, I want to sort of do a quick little commercial of how Tricentis fits into the whole continuous integration and continuous development world in the DevOps world. So it really doesn't matter what you're using, Jira, TFS, ALM for planning and managing your testing effort, or QA Symphony, which is now QTest, which is a Tricentis product. Any of those tools can be used with Tosca. Tosca Connect can connect to any of these, share the information, and be able to use one interface in order to do all the communications with your test planning. QA Symphony, which is now, like I say, it's QTest. QA Symphony has been acquired by Tricentis last year. So this is kind of an old slide that I forgot to update, apologies. Has awesome integrations with Jira, and Tosca integrates with QTest. So automatically all of the test management data, the requirements, tabs, and everything in Tosca talk to QTest. QTest also has communications abilities with all of the other testing tools that are on here and can easily replace any of those. Also, similarly, it does not matter what code base you're using or how you're storing it. Tosca integrates with all of these tools that you see on the page, and you can then use the Tosca CI listener to say, oh, I've just deployed code. The CI listener says, oh, great, it's time for me to run a test. So then it can run those tests and then store the results in the repository, whatever repository we're connected to, whether you're storing it in the Tosca repository or if you're using one of the other tools like QA Symphony or Jira or ALM. Also, we have the ability to use multiple agents. So if you want to speed up your testing further, you can use the Tosca distributed execution agents to split up your testing amongst multiple agents and do it even faster. We also integrate with all of the deployment and monitoring tools. So it's easy for Tosca to pull diagnostics, and diagnostics in Tosca are based on click technology. So we can pull all of the data from any of these other systems and then be able to do one-stop shopping for reporting. Let's go. Tosca also makes it very easy for you to integrate with any type of technology. So we showed you a web browser, which you would expect, right? But you can also do mobile apps. You can do .NET, Java. You can even do older technology like SQL Windows and Power Builder. You can also work with green screen applications, 3270 emulators, different databases, web services, XML, REST, JSON. So we have adapters for, I think the count is more like 150 technologies at this point. So there isn't a technology that we can't automate. And at the very worst case, you see the little ... over here. The ... means we can build it. So if we don't have an existing engine to go in, recognize those objects, we can build a new one. Also, there are a lot of built-in integrations with most of the major enterprise applications, SAP and Oracle, Salesforce, ServiceNow. So not only can you test multiple different types of technologies, but we also have accelerators that are available for being able to test SAP and Salesforce, for example. And that makes it even easier for you to get started and be able to go from one enterprise app to the next. So if you need to do integration testing across multiple enterprise apps, you have one tool that can integrate across all of them. So what does it look like typically when we start a Tricentis Tosca project? Well, let's take one example of there were 1,600 complex test cases that needed to be built. Traditional staffing would have required 8 people. With Tosca, we used 4 people. The estimate for doing the scripted approach was 24 weeks with 8 people. With Tricentis Tosca, we were able to accomplish it in 8 weeks. So just using Tosca over other automated testing tools can give you a 6-time efficiency in being able to build out your test automation and maintain it. Likewise, once we say we're taking our former manual testers and turning them into automation specialists, what about, you know, all the technical stuff that happens and where problems come up? Well, what we found over the course of time with all of our customers is that we do need technical engineers in order to be able to support our automation efforts. But the ratio of automation engineers to manual or now automation specialists is a 10-to-1 ratio, works out really, really, really well. And so when you used to have, say, 8 Selenium developers in order to do automation, now you could take 10 manual testers, turn them into automation specialists, and have 1 developer being able to support your efforts. Throughout the webinar, we've talked about different testing tools. So the Tricentis continuous testing platform, in order to drive to that 85% goal and to squash down how many tests we need in order to be able to effectively test in our Agile and DevOps world, we've got Qtest for test management. We've got Tosca for automated scriptless testing. And we've got Tricentis Flood for our cloud-based performance testing. So that's the tool set that we're doing. And with the ability to manage, automate, do exploratory testing, and optimize with load testing, we're able to easily increase our risk coverage, reduce the speed and expense of automating, and get us to that goal that our CIO had of giving me an order of magnitude of improvement in order to be able to compete with the rest of the world. Now we've gone from a position of struggling to compete to leading in our market space. Let's walk through a quick case study. So in the real world, this is a real example. We had a customer, when I say we, Tricentis has a customer that had 11 manual testers that had a test case portfolio of 4,755 manual test cases. They were doing 100% manual testing. Every time they wanted to release a build, it would take them 10 weeks to execute a regression test set. When they were asked what their risk coverage was, they didn't really have an answer for that. And so the project charter that they had was, there's got to be a better way out there to do this, so go out and find it. Well, they did. They found Tosca. And with Tosca, the first thing we did was go in and assess risk coverage for the existing test cases. And then once we've done that, we're like, well, how much of the test cases out there are redundant, and how much could we reduce it with the same risk coverage? And the answer was we could reduce it by 75%. Then we could go through those test cases and augment them to make sure that they covered more risk. And we're able to optimize those test cases to cover almost 90% of our risk. And the result of that was to reduce our execution time by half. Now we haven't automated anything yet. Now we analyzed how much time of that execution we were spending on test data, and it was almost half of the time. So with test data management, we were able to automate how we used test data and produced it for our regression testing. And we were able to cut that time down in half. So now we're down to 2.5 weeks. Again, we haven't automated anything yet. So now we went and started to analyze it for automation. And we found that we could automate 64% with the API tests, the rest with Tricentis Tosca, doing the scriptless automation that we showed in the demo. And we could automate 92% of our functionality and cover 90% of our risk. And the resulting automation reduced our execution time down to 48 hours with a single agent. Now, I did mention earlier that we have a distributed execution agent that you can use, and you can use multiples. So if we were to do that with 6 agents, we could cut our execution time down even more to now 8 hours. Now, we also want to make sure that in a continuous integration environment, not only are we going to test major releases with a full regression test set, but every time we do a build, we want to make sure that the build is right and we didn't break anything. So we went through and analyzed it again and said, hey, we can do, with 7% of our test cases, we could do a smoke test that covers 53% of our business risk. And we can do that in a half hour. So now we can do, every time we do a build, we execute this regression test set, and within a half hour, we know if we have any problems and can go in and remediate them, and then do another build and do another test. And when the test comes out clean, it's ready to go into production. So what is the result, the overall result of quality? Well, as a result of the way that we've done this, we are now 72% fewer critical defects are leaking into production as a result. So very powerful case study. And in case you thought that one was made up, here's some real names. Allianz, Agile testing for their core insurance system with 4.5 million lines of code. They had 19,000 test cases. It was reduced to 3,500. The risk coverage was increased to 93%. The accelerated execution went from 4 weeks down to 3 days. It's a 9-time reduction. So you know that 10-time number that we showed you earlier, the 10-time numbers can be conservative, what can be accomplished. You see the Bank West, same thing, online banking system, 2,000 tests down to 600, 30% coverage up to 85, 120 hours down to 30. Deutsche Post, DHL, Vantiv, again, just amazing reductions in number of test cases that you need to execute, increases in risk coverage, and reductions in execution times. Tosca gives you all of these things. So how do you get there? That's what we want to talk about next. To transform your team, there's basically 5 steps. The first thing is getting Tosca in your hands and trying it out. Then there's all kinds of self-paced learning available. Then you also have the option of using a company like us, SPR, we're a silver partner. We can help you with advanced training. We can also help you with your model build-outs and defining a pilot project. So what do we mean by self-paced learning? Well, Tricentis has an extensive library of certification classes. So they have at the automation specialist level, which is your introduction to Tosca, 2 classes. Takes about 32 hours of being in front of a screen and working through it as a dedicated effort to get through those 2 classes. Automation engineer, more detailed, more technical, a little bit more difficult to get through, 48 hours of work, more than a week of sitting down and getting through these certification classes. But most of the customers, if they invest the time in taking their manual testers and putting them through the automation specialist class, they can then be productive in an amazingly short period of time. One of the things we recommend is if you're going to invest in Tosca to automate is to also identify what level of people you have and how they're going to get the most out of the tool set. So what we recommend is that you take a look at the learning paths that are available to you on the Tricentis website, and then the sequence of classes that you have to take in order to achieve the different certifications. And the certifications are not an end to themselves. It's like, oh, I'm certified. No, it's about gaining all the knowledge that you need about the tool in order to apply it in your workplace. So if someone is going to be architecting every one of your applications and saying, here's how we're going to apply this tool, they need to have advanced knowledge of the tool and then gain the experience that they need. So those learning paths help you differentiate between the different roles that you're going to need as you move forward. Then you can identify learning plans for each of your team members and customize them. We also provide risk-based requirements workshops and mentoring as you go through your test design 1 and 2 classes, automated test design concepts and a workshop, and mentoring for your AE1 and AE2 courses. We find that these things help speed along your ability to absorb the material and apply it into your work environment. We'll also can identify a consulting engagement to help you build out your objects. The model build out is very important because you can just go in and scan page after page after page. But the real power of this is being able to design an approach for reusing those different components and organizing them in a correct way. So once you do that, then you can also use that reusable components and exercise them in the test case and use the test case design to build out all your different testing instances or cycles and develop what we call purpose-focused scenarios. So, and you saw that in the examples earlier. The final step of you getting all of this in place, you've done some of the learning, you've ready to get your hands dirty. We could select a pilot project and then run through that pilot project so that you can take on something that's accomplishable in a shorter period of time, get a win inside your organization, make sure that all of the people who have gone through the training are applying what they've learned and building out the reusable test cases that you need. So the pilot project identification, final selection of the project, staffing it, and then the kickoff, that's the last step on you jumping off into the deep end and swimming in the deep end of the pool. Then once we're doing that, then it's all tracking and metric collection and using the analysis functions that are built into the tool and being able to show that high level of transparency to your stakeholders so that they can see what kind of progress you're making and what a great investment they made and how productive you're going to be and what a great thing it is to be working with Tricentis and Tosca and SPR. So our role in this at SPR is to help you develop your talent and get up to speed and be successful with the tool. And then you have the Tricentis support portal, which is a great asset that you can go out and get all kinds of videos, information, knowledge base articles, and not to mention help desk support as well. So with that, we are SPR. I'm Al Rago. It's been my pleasure to host this webinar for you. I think we've run out of time, so that I'm going to end the webinar. Thank you very much for your participation and your attention. You can reach me at the following. You can reach us at spr.com. You've got my phone number and my email. So I hope to hear from you, and happy automation with Tosca. Hopefully this will wet your whistle and point you in the direction of using scriptless automation to solve your testing problems. Thank you once again, and have a great day.